The space station Oculus Prime was a marvel of engineering. An enormous floating hub in the heart of neutral space, designed to house representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Today, its corridors were filled with an unspoken tension. A dozen alien species, united by one desperate need, had come together for the first time in over a century of galactic war. The Gorath, a terrifyingly advanced and relentless empire, had pushed every species to the brink of extinction. Only one race seemed to have the strength to stop them: humanity. The leaders of the alien factions, including the Varl, a race of six-legged insectoids with advanced intellects but fragile bodies, the Harn, gas giant dwellers with an inability to survive on solid planets, and the towering Krynok, a warrior race with thick armored hides and an unyielding thirst for battle, all gathered in a sleek, angular conference room. Each one had come to a conclusion they could no longer deny: humanity was their only chance for survival. Ambassador Shorka, the Varl's representative, was the first to speak. "The Gorath will end us all if we don't act now. Our fleets are scattered. Our planets are burning. Only humans have the will and the means to survive the blue Deathworlds. Only they can reclaim the planets we've lost." The room grew silent, the weight of her words hanging over the assembly like a shadow. The blue Deathworlds were infamous, planets so hostile, so deadly, that no species could survive on them. Extreme weather, hostile creatures, toxic atmospheres. Every species that had attempted to colonize them had failed. And yet, humanity had thrived. Commander Elena Taurus, who had been chosen to represent Earth, stood. "We've survived on those worlds because we *adapt*. Where others perish, we learn, we overcome." Her voice was steady, unwavering. "If you want our help, it's not just about survival. We're talking about a war to reclaim our homes and the very future of the galaxy. Are you prepared to fight?" The representatives exchanged glances. There was no turning back now. The choice was made. Humanity was their only hope, and they would stop at nothing to ensure Earth's survival, even if it meant standing alone against the galaxy's deadliest enemy. The ship shuddered as it descended through the storm-choked skies of Athrix IV, a planet notorious for its extreme atmospheric conditions. Commander Elena Torres gripped the controls, sweat beading on her forehead. Her team of Marines, engineers, and scientists sat tense behind her, each one bracing for the inevitable impact. The storm had been building for hours. Lightning streaked across the sky, flashing like jagged knives, and wind speeds reached hurricane-force levels. The sensors on the bridge flickered sporadically as the shuttle's hull groaned under the strain of the storm's fury. "We're not going to make it if this keeps up," shouted Corporal Jason Reed, the ship's flight officer, as a sudden burst of turbulence threw him against his harness. "The landing gear won't hold if we're hit by another gust." "Trust me, Reed. We will make it," Elena replied, her voice cold and sharp. She punched the thrusters and angled the shuttle toward the rough terrain below, navigating the chaos with practiced precision. Her thoughts were focused, each move calculated. As much as Athrix IV wanted to kill them, Elena had learned over the years that the key to surviving was accepting that the planet would always be a step ahead and never showing fear. The shuttle's landing struts screeched in protest as it finally slammed into the rocky, rain-soaked ground. The moment the doors opened, the team was assaulted by the stench of sulfur and burning vegetation. Thick clouds of toxic gas swirled around them, and the ground was alive with strange, ominous sounds, distant roars, and the rustling of massive creatures unseen. Sergeant Marcus Lopez, the squad's heavy weapons specialist, gave a grim look as he stepped out first, his pulse rifle slung low. "This is what we're up against," he muttered, eyeing the barren, rocky expanse. Towering jagged peaks rose on the horizon, and the ground was pocked with deep craters. The air was thin and laced with the acrid tang of chemicals, barely breathable. "Set up perimeter," Elena ordered. "We're not here for sightseeing. We're building base camp, and we're doing it fast." As her team moved to work, the true danger of Athrix IV began to reveal itself, not just the hostile environment, but the asterisk planet itself asterisk, as though it were alive and resentful of their presence. The first night would be the hardest. Only those who understood the value of adapting would survive. Back on Oculus Prime, the Intergalactic Council was in chaos. The ambassadors had returned from their meeting with the humans, each reporting something that couldn't be ignored. Humanity was surviving on Athrix IV. Against all odds, they were not only enduring the hostile environment, but also beginning to thrive. The Varl ambassador, Shurka, had been the first to voice what many feared: humans were different. Their resilience wasn't just a matter of will or technology. It was something more, something alien to the other races. "Have you seen the data from the human colony on Athrix IV?" Shurka's voice echoed in the vast chamber, her insectoid form exuding both urgency and disbelief. "It's impossible. They've built shelters from the planet's own volatile resources. They've turned its weather against us, trapping predators in firestorms. No other species has ever adapted like this." Her words hit like a cold, sharp blade. The council chamber fell into uneasy silence. The Krynok ambassador, Torak, stood up, his massive form looming over the others. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "We've tried to colonize planets like Athrix IV. Every attempt has failed. But the humans, they don't just survive, they thrive. Why?" Shurka's antenna twitched nervously. "I don't know, but we cannot ignore this anomaly any longer. If humanity can unlock the secrets of the blue Deathworlds, they could wield power beyond anything we've seen. Imagine if they learned how to control the environments themselves, how to terraform planets once thought uninhabitable." Torak's gaze turned hard, calculating. The blue Deathworlds have been a graveyard for every other species. But if humans can conquer them, could they build new worlds from them? A new empire? The room stirred with murmurs. The idea of humanity mastering the Deathworlds was both fascinating and terrifying. The Varl, Harn, and Krynok had long struggled against these planets' cruelty. But humans had found a way to thrive, not just survive. It was clear now. Humanity was no longer just a tool for survival. It was a potential threat. As the council debated, a chilling thought crossed the minds of the alien representatives. Asterisk, what if humanity was the true weapon of the blue Deathworlds, and not just their victims? The first sighting of the Kravith came without warning. The ground trembled beneath the feet of Commander Elena Taurus and her team as they worked feverishly to complete the construction of their base. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur and ozone, the skies constantly shifting with violent storms. The human outpost was barely a skeleton of what it needed to be: bare metal frames, hastily assembled shelters, and makeshift defensive walls. Eyes open, Elena called, scanning the horizon. She'd been in hostile environments before, but this planet seemed intent on challenging every plan they made. Suddenly, Sergeant Marcus Lopez, standing watch at the perimeter, raised a hand in the air. His voice crackled over the comms. "Movement, something big, and it's coming fast." Moments later, the ground shook again, harder this time, and Elena's heart skipped a beat. A low, guttural roar echoed through the air, cutting through the storm's howling winds. From the dense jungle ahead, something massive emerged, a creature the size of a small building, with armored reptilian plates covering its body and long wicked claws that scraped the ground as it moved. "Elena, what the hell is that?" Reed's voice was tight with fear, even though he tried to mask it with bravado. "Elate Kravith," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "They're apex predators, territorial relentless. We've got to keep our distance and keep moving. Don't engage unless necessary." The Kravith stopped 100 meters away, their glowing eyes narrowing as they sized up the humans. The air was thick with a tense standoff, the heavy growl of the predators making the humans' blood run cold. But instead of retreating or freezing in fear, Elena acted immediately. "Lopez, prep the seismic charges. Reed, get the drones in the air. We're not running." As the Kravith roared and charged, the humans sprang into action. With practiced precision, Lopez set off seismic charges beneath the ground, triggering small earthquakes. The Kravith faltered as the ground cracked and shifted beneath them. Reed's drones fired smoke canisters to disorient the predators. They were using the planet's chaos against its creatures. The Kravith, confused and enraged, began to retreat into the jungle. But not before Elena caught a glimpse of something else, something more terrifying. The Kravith were coordinating, and that meant they were not alone. This battle had only just begun. The discovery came when the storm finally relented, leaving behind a blistering dry heat that shimmered over the cracked earth. Dr. Ava Riley, the team's lead archaeologist and historian, had been searching for a way to access the underground ruins she had detected from orbit. The planet's toxic atmosphere made exploration dangerous, but after a week of steady progress, she and her team managed to locate a large, weather-worn entrance beneath the jagged cliffs near the settlement's perimeter. As they entered the narrow, pitch-black passage, the hum of their equipment was the only sound that broke the oppressive silence. Dr. Riley's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing strange markings along the stone walls, alien symbols, worn down by centuries of dust and decay. The air inside felt colder, as though it were carrying the whispers of the lost civilization. "Look at this," Ava murmured, kneeling before a set of intricate carvings on the wall. "This isn't just any ancient structure. This is a message." A flash of recognition lit up her face. The markings were familiar, almost like a language, but unlike anything seen before. As she began to decipher them, a sense of dread crept over her. The message was written by an ancient race, far older than the Gorath or any known species. A civilization that had long ago vanished, leaving behind only a series of cryptic warnings. Commander Elena Torres crouched beside her. "What are we looking at, Doc?" "These inscriptions, they're not just warnings, they're instructions. Instructions on how to survive on this planet." Ava traced a symbol that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The message seemed clear now. Afric's IV was no accident. It was designed as a crucible, an environment meant to test and shape the species for something greater. As realization set in, the pieces fell into place. The blue Deathworlds weren't just random planets. They had been engineered. And the race that created them, they'd been waiting for humanity to arrive. "A test," Elena said, her voice quiet but resolute. "And we're the ones they were waiting for." The weight of the discovery hung heavily in the air. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. The blue Deathworlds had a purpose humanity was now uniquely poised to unlock. Back at Oculus Prime, the Council had not taken kindly to the revelations from Afric's IV. The news that the blue Deathworlds were not merely hostile planets, but artificial tests for humanity, had sparked fear among the galaxy's ruling species. And their fears manifested quickly in the form of military action. The Gorath, always quick to take advantage of weakness, were the first to mobilize. Within days, a massive fleet of warships, hundreds of heavily armed dreadnoughts and strike cruisers, entered Athrix IV's orbit. They were determined to wipe out the human foothold before it could become a threat. Other species, still reeling from humanity's unexpected success, reluctantly joined the assault, their combined forces forming a formidable armada. Commander Elena Torres and her team watched the skies darken as the enemy ships descended. Her team had known this day would come, but even so, the reality of it hit like a blow to the stomach. They were still in the early stages of setting up their base. The defences were crude and temporary, built from the wreckage of their landing gear and scavenged materials. Against the Gorath fleet, they stood little chance. Target lock on the base is active, reported Sergeant Marcus Lopez from the communications station. They're coming in hot, ETA 15 minutes. Elena's mind raced, weighing their limited options. There was no way they could win a direct confrontation. They needed time. Time to evacuate, time to regroup, and most importantly, time to unlock the secrets of the planet's power before the Gorath destroyed everything. All hands, prepare for evasive maneuvers, Elena barked. We're not running. We're going to make them regret landing here. Lopez nodded. They'll regret it, all right. We've got seismic charges set and ready. If they think they can just stomp through this planet like it's some backwater, they're in for a surprise. A deep rumbling shook the ground as the first salvo of the Gorath fleet's artillery hit the surface, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. The humans, however, were not retreating. Instead, they used the planet's unstable terrain to their advantage, triggering controlled seismic charges that split the Earth, creating massive craters and fissures that swallowed the advancing Gorath troops and their vehicles whole. For a brief moment, the Gorath faltered, but only for a moment. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and the wrath of a blue Deathworld pushed to the edge. As the battle raged on, Elena knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had learned to adapt, but now they had to prove that they could fight and win on their terms. The battle for Athrix IV had escalated into a brutal war of attrition. For days, the Gorath had pounded the planet's surface with relentless firepower, their dreadnoughts orbiting like vultures, raining down destruction. In response, Commander Elena Torres and her team fought back with everything they had, using the planet's unstable geology as their weapon, triggering seismic disruptions, collapsing tunnels, and even setting off controlled volcanic eruptions to wipe out enemy troops. But despite their ingenuity, the human resistance was starting to crumble. Supplies were running low. The human forces had suffered heavy casualties, and morale was beginning to wane. Worse still, the Gorath were adapting. They had managed to capture several of the seismic charge devices that had been wreaking havoc on their forces, and now they were countering with their own destructive methods, flooding the planet's atmosphere with toxins that slowed human movement and clouded their vision. At the command post, Elena stood over a holographic map of their base, her eyes dark with exhaustion. The map glowed faintly, showing the position of both the remaining human forces and the approaching Gorath legions. It was a losing battle. The only way to save their people was to take drastic action. Listen up, Elena began, addressing her squad. We have one shot at this. A weapon we've been developing in secret, the Genesis device, is ready for activation. If we deploy it, we can use Athrix IV's volatile core to trigger a cataclysmic chain reaction. It'll wipe out the Gorath fleet and secure the planet for humanity, but there's no coming back from it. The device is designed to destroy everything in the surrounding area. It's the final strike. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. The Genesis device was humanity's last resort, a doomsday weapon powered by the planet's own extreme environment. Elena knew what this meant. Using the device would sacrifice not just the enemy, but their base, their survivors, and everything they'd fought for. "We won't be able to evacuate in time," Elena continued. "Once we initiate the countdown, it's over for us. We're all in. Anyone who's not on board, now's the time to make a choice." Her team looked at each other. There were no words, no protests, just a shared understanding. It was the only way. "We fight to the end," Lopez said quietly. "Let's finish this." Elena nodded, her voice tight with emotion. "Then let's make sure they know exactly who they're dealing with." The sky above Athrix IV crackled with the energy of impending doom. The Gorath fleet had encircled the planet, their massive warships blocking the sun, casting long shadows over the shattered landscape. On the ground, Commander Elena Torres and her remaining forces had set the final stage for humanity's last stand. The Genesis device was ready. Its countdown had begun. In less than 12 hours, the planet's core would implode, triggering an explosion so massive that it would consume everything in its radius, including the Gorath fleet orbiting above. The human team was gathered in the heart of their battered base, which had now been reinforced with explosives, traps, and last-ditch defenses. Elena looked over her squad one last time. Each one of them had fought, bled, and sacrificed. Their faces were marked with exhaustion, but there was a fire in their eyes. They weren't going to let the Gorath take this world. Not without a fight. "We've done everything we could," Sergeant Marcus Lopez said, his voice gruff but steady. "Now it's time to finish it. We hold this position, no matter what." Elena gave a tight nod. She activated the final sequence on her console, watching as the holographic timer ticked down. They had less than 10 minutes. As the countdown drew closer, the ground trembled. A roar echoed from the east. A wave of Kravith, more numerous and enraged than before, charged toward the human position, determined to finish what the Gorath couldn't. Their massive armoured bodies crushed anything in their path, but Elena knew there was no turning back now. "Brace yourselves," Elena shouted. "They'll be on us in 5 minutes. Hold the line." The battle was chaotic. The Kravith swarmed in, their claws tearing through the earth, but the humans held firm. Lopez fired the last of the seismic charges, triggering massive eruptions that took out dozens of the creatures. Reed unleashed the final wave of drones, dropping incendiary explosives that burned through the jungle, turning the landscape into an inferno. As the Gorath forces descended from the skies, preparing their final assault, Elena gave the order. "Activate the Genesis device." The ground shook violently. A blinding flash of light enveloped everything, human, alien, and planet alike. The shockwave of destruction rippled outward, obliterating the Gorath fleet in orbit, reducing everything in its path to ash. The last echoes of the explosion reverberated across the stars. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, there was silence. Then the holographic timer flickered, 0. Humanity had won, but at an unimaginable cost.